Hello, this is your friendly neighborhood group dynamics professor. We are in my office, which you are more than welcome to if you live nearby. My online office hours are in the contact on Blackboard, and feel free to swing by even though you're online. If you don't live nearby, feel free to email me, send me a video, whatnot. So today I thought we would go over some of the things in the readings in the last couple of weeks that I wanted to point out, kind of talk about. Think of it like class, except you're there with a soda, hopefully a coffee, something you're sipping on, maybe some chocolate. Yeah. And I'm here and we're hanging out. And I just can't hear you, though I will talk to you as if you are participating. So, excellent. Okay, so a couple things that we want to go over just to make sure that we kind of pull out from the reading. It's been, it's one thing to read, but I think having a teacher sort of talk about some of those things is great. So one of the things is, have you noticed there are multiple definitions for what a group is? That there isn't one flat, sort of thing that tracks. In fact, Forsyth in their reading, in the group dynamics reading, has an entire page that sort of highlights some of the definitions and theories that define what a group is. So some of the things you'll notice, some people really believe that groups are two or more people. They put that right in the definition and they say that. Several believe that groups are three or more people, that there's a difference between a couple or a partnership and a group. Some of the definitions really emphasize the socialness, right? So the idea of people being together, multiple minds coming together to do something, right? So they really emphasize the socialness, the people aspect. One definition even uses the term organisms, which I love, right? So broadening that beyond people to being really opening that up to what a group is. Whereas some of the definitions focus more on the goal or the roles, right? So obviously the people are connected to that. The people are setting the goal. The people are in the roles. But it's more about what the group is functioning as, what they're doing. And then some of the definitions, of course, try to balance both of those things. But we see kind of both of those things in all of the definitions, and that the definitions are trying to wrap around that. One of the terms I really wanted to make sure that we caught was interdependence. So this idea that groups are interdependent upon each other, meaning that they're entwined, right? That they're connected and that their actions impact and affect the other group members. Some multiple examples of this. I think the easiest example, and it's come up in some of the questions online, is the idea of being graded, right? So when you're working as a group, do we get graded as a group, right? That's a pretty big example of when there's an interdependence, right? That my actions might impact your grade, right? But I think that we can broaden that, so it's not just about the grade. I mean, that's a pretty specific example of interdependence. But also like in family structures, or in relationship structures, where if you've got something happening to one member of the group, that's clearly going to impact the other members. Or what the other members are doing could emotionally or logistically impact the other group members. I think we really have this tendency to think of groups as like something in class that someone defines and assigns and says, okay, I'm online, I'm taking the group class, these are the people in my group, we have to do this and this and this to get this grade. But the big reason you're taking this class is not to do that, it's to understand how the groups that are naturally functioning anyway in your lives work and interact with each other. So whether that's a family group, whether that's what you're doing at work, so the groups that are functioning at work, whether that's in your private life, so I'm thinking of churches, sports teams, whatever it is you're sort of involved in, lots of community work, lots of nonprofits. I mean, all of those things. I've worked in theater for years. All of those things really encompass group dynamics. And I think if you start thinking of some of the groups in your life, you'll really start to see different examples of that concept of interdependence, right? How the people in the group are connected to each other and influence each other. So then we get into types of groups. Forsyth, in the group dynamics reading, they highlight 4 larger groups, right? So you've got primary, social, collectives, and then categories. And so then from so Forsyth identifies this this sort of larger theoretical understanding of 4 types of groups. The working in groups reading, which was week 1, on page 7, they kind of break that down even more. So they have primary and social, but then they have a bunch of different, more specific types of groups. And I think that list, so whereas Forsyth is more theoretical, theirs on page 7 is much more functional, right? So they're sort of listing groups, learning groups, self-help groups, civic groups, work groups, public groups, service groups. So similar functions and similar category styles, but not as large. I think many of those obviously would fit in the 4 categories that Forsyth defines. In the group dynamics reading, they talked about the word paradigm. I wanted to make sure everyone knew what a paradigm was. I also didn't love their definition. Their definition is certainly correct, but it's pretty specific for the reading and for what they want you to use it for. I want to make sure you know the word in multiple contexts. So obviously read that definition and know that. But also the word paradigm basically is a set of understanding. So a set of knowledge or a way of understanding something. And the 2 ways that I like to explain paradigm to show how vast this can be is paradigm deals with our understanding of the world. So we used to believe the world was flat, and that was our paradigm. That was our understanding, our concept of the world. Where you can really see paradigms functioning is when they have to shift. So when you had someone then saying, no, the world is not flat. The world is round. Everyone said, no, the world is flat. The world is flat. That's what we know. That's what we understand. That's our paradigm. But now we have shifted into the paradigm of the world being round. It's not technically round. It's more elliptical. But, right, this idea that the world is actually round. So we have shifted our paradigm on that. So paradigm can refer to some of those big understandings, those big shifts. But also I like to think of paradigm as a smaller thing or a thing that happens much more often. So let's say we're all going to go to dinner, all right? And Amy, why don't you pick the place? So Amy's going to pick the place, and it's probably going to be some place that can seat all of us. And so then we're all gonna go. Awesome. So Amy has reserved us a place at a pizza place. That's her favorite food. So we're all going to go eat pizza together, and we're super pumped about it because we haven't met each other yet, so we're all going to go eat pizza. And and so we're really excited, and we've talked about what kind of pizzas we want, and we're pretty pumped about it. And last minute, we find out that the pizza place is closed that night, and so we can't go eat pizza. So instead, Monica, I believe, is it Monica or Monica? You'll have to correct me. But I'm going to say Monica for right now. So Monica says, let's go eat Mediterranean food. That's my favorite type of food. And I'm like, no. You promised me pizza. I wanted pizza. And then last minute it has to shift to Mediterranean food. I mean, that's a great example of paradigm shifting. So we had the paradigm that we were going to go eat pizza. That was our understanding. That was our viewpoint. But then when that didn't work out, it had to shift to Mediterranean food. And I sometimes joke I'm a slow paradigm shifter. If I've got one thing set, it takes me a second to shift. So obviously in your readings, it's going to be used in a much bigger context, that we used to have one viewpoint and now it has shifted to this. But paradigm is basically the set constructed understanding of knowledge and things. They talked a little bit about group mind, and I wanted to talk just really briefly about that. They did a lovely job of sort of laying out that groups could come so much together that they almost had one brain, which I thought was really cool. I pay a lot of attention to the word that they use instead of that, which is collective consciousness. And collective consciousness, I think, is the most positive way to describe that. The image that I think is perfect for that are the birds or bees, right? If you've seen groups of birds and they're all flying together and they all shift at the same time. Or bees, when bees fly, it's not like they're all buzzing and then one's running into each other, and there isn't a lot of obvious communication in that. They all seem to be minded in a way that they know where to move, right? If you've seen birds come down and then at the last minute they all swoop one way, and it's like, how do they know to do that? Collective consciousness. That's how they know how to do that. The word that they didn't mention that I think is connected to this, it has a slightly different definition, but it's connected, is the concept of hive mind. So hive mind really directly refers to like the birds or those bees, not the birds and the bees. That's different. But hive mind is often used as a negative term, and to sort of refer to this idea that like if groups are so into each other and only are using each other and they become one brain, that prevents critical understanding to sort of say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. The biggest, most cliche example that I think in our time comes up is the concept of Nazi Germany, right? That there was this collective understanding. I mean, granted, we had leaders, but that really formed its own group, right? Nazi Germany really formed its own group, and there was this hive mind, right? This understanding that there would be a superior race, and that this is what we would do, and that this is what Germany would be. And you talk to people afterwards, and they were sort of like, yeah, we just, not everybody really believed that, but they were sort of swept into that concept of hive mind. So slightly different than group mind or collective consciousness, which I think are often used as more positive terms to describe the way that people form together to really consciously move with each other. But that also can have some negative effects as well. And then finally, you just want to note the interdisciplinary nature of group studies. I love the page in working in group dynamics, in the Forsyth reading, where it just lays out all of the disciplines. And some of you are under the impression that I'm a psych professor, which I love because it's a psych course. It's actually, and this is why I put on the scavenger hunt, it's a psych course, a soc course, and a comm course. And I'm actually a comm professor. I actually have a background in theater, and have been teaching communication studies for years now. Comm pulls a lot of their readings and stuff from soc and psych. So definitely not worried about that crossover. But no matter what field you're in, and I believe in this class, we have people in all three categories, right? You're going to get some crossover and see how interdisciplinary this concept of group dynamics is, which is really cool. Okay, so I said finally last time, and what I meant was finally for my notes. Now I'm super excited because what I really want to do is spend some time talking about the sort of dialectics that are laid out for the group dialectics. So we're in that first reading for week 1, and we're on page 15. So the reading is the Working in Groups reading, and we're on page 15. And they list all of these dialectics, and I just wanted to talk about them because I think reading them on the page, it was kind of one thing, but I really wanted to explain them. And in order to do so, I'm going to use my cats. These are my 2 cats. On the left, we have Titus, who is named after a Roman emperor. I wouldn't recommend that. Titus basically believes he is an emperor, or at very least an evil genius, trapped inside a cat's body. Sometimes I catch him just meowing for no reason, and I think it's because he's realized he's a cat. He forgets and then he remembers, and it's very tragic. On the right, we have Apollo, who is much more like a dog. He's a Maine Coon. Sometimes he'll fetch. Always looks very helpful. Maine Coons used to be mousers on Navy ships, and so he's very fascinated with water, certainly doesn't want to touch it, but loves it when the dishwasher backs up water in the sink. And the reason I have chosen my cats to go over these dialectics is that I think it is tempting when you're brought a dialectic to assume it is a hard and fast binary, and then to give one a positive value and one a negative value. But most of these don't have strict, unmoving, positive, I mean, none of them have positive and negative values. It's a matter of these things balancing themselves. And so I love both of my cats dearly, but they have very different personalities, and so I'm going to use them to explain the spectrum of these dialectics and how they can be balanced within each other. So the first dialectic is individual goals versus group goals. And I think if you told Titus he had to work in a group, this would be his response. He was born a stray and loves to fight, loves to bite, and pretty much does his own thing. Doesn't really give a lot of mind to his brother or to Matthew and I. Very, very independent and worried about himself. Apollo, on the other hand, is much more connected to all of us as a group. So he very much bonds or nuzzles Matthew and I much more often, and is pretty aware of where Titus is all the time. And so he's pretty sort of watching and much more interested in us as a family or us as a group. And so this first dialectic balances these. You want to have individual goals, but you also want to have group goals. When I used to coach a speech team, we were at Concordia, we were an open access squad, which means there were no auditions. Everybody who wanted to be on the team got to be on the team. And we didn't mandate how many tournaments you attended or what events you did. There was a lot of individual agency involved. That being said, we had a pretty high group goal of being in the top 20 at nationals, which nobody could do by themselves. It really had to be a collection of those individual goals equaling group goals. And when I would recruit, I would say we engage in this struggle sort of delightfully. And it was a struggle. It was really hard sometimes to balance individual agency with what was best for the group. So this is that first dialectic, individual goals versus group goals. The next is conflict versus cohesion. Titus is much more interested in standing up for himself and really loves, I think, conflict, especially when it's time to eat. He likes to yell even while I am feeding him. One time I said to him, "Why are you yelling at me? I'm feeding you." And his response was, "Wow!" And I said, "No, stop it. I'm doing it. Wow!" And we went back and forth for a while. So Titus will absolutely engage in conflict. Apollo, shown here, snuggling against someone, much more about cohesion. So startle's very easy. Doesn't not super interested in conflict or opposition, but much more about finding that cohesion and finding how to be committed or unified to each other. Hopefully you're catching on that these cat pictures are designed to help you remember these and help you learn these. This next one we have non-conforming versus conforming. So you've got Apollo on the right. I love this photo. All the cool kids were doing it, so he decided to have some wine, which is not good for cats. Titus on the left, crossing his paws, sitting on whoever's clothes he wants. He'll do whatever he wants, totally non-conforming. This balance, really deals with that concept of group norms, right? And how we balance the commitment of how we're behaving with each other, and conforming to what other people want and compromising, and how much we're really sticking with that sort of individualistic or non-conforming, and providing constructive criticism, right, which really can help the group effectiveness. Next, we have task dimensions versus social dimensions. And this one really relates back to how I was talking about all those definitions and how some really focus more on the goal or what the group was doing, the roles, the tasks, and some really focus much more on social dimensions or, how the group is behaving with each other, the benefits that you're getting and playing off each other, or how the social connection with each other can benefit what you're doing. You really sort of need both. And I will point out that while task dimensions, I think, seem really obvious, like why else are we in the group, right? A lot of the benefits, so if on that same reading, the working in groups reading, you go back a few pages where it talks about the advantages and disadvantages, several of the advantages of working in groups come from those social dimensions. And so this is a really important balance and deals with interpersonal relationships and how you're building with each other, discussing with each other, but also how you're balancing that work and play and how you're being productive. Next, we have heterogeneous versus homogeneous. I'm very proud of myself for the visuals on this one. On the left, you've got Titus, being himself, being his independent self. Tabbies, especially stray tabbies, don't particularly, they have a general commonality, but can be shaded very differently and sort of appear very different. And I very rarely see cats that look like Titus. Whereas on Apollo, Maine Coons look so similar to each other. I'm often startled when I see pictures of other people's Maine Coons because it looks so much like our Apollo. Apollo's actually on the top, and on the bottom is our friend's cat. Her name is Puss Puss. And I love this picture because not only are they both on blue blankets, both blankets are mine. And the bottom one, Puss Puss, is holding my blanket hostage. But they're laying similarly. They have got, similar shading, and they look very similar. So this dialectic refers to, how much the group becomes similar, right? So homogeneous are composed of members who are similar to one another, and then heterogeneous is much more focusing on the difference from one another. Obviously, there's no pure homogeneous groups because we're all different. Flashback to 90s PBS commercials. Everyone's different. We're all little special snowflakes. But to some extent, we really are aware of, in our groups, what are the commonalities and what are the differences. So this dialectic pays attention to those. We have leadership and followership. This is Titus leading his own life. He lays wherever he wants, sits wherever he wants. Often mornings he'll spend all morning on the bed just laying there. On the right, that is Apollo following the smell of food into the refrigerator. Really, I just think this is a great picture, and I wanted you to see the cat in the refrigerator. But hopefully these pictures will help you understand. And this one, we know this one. We've been fed this one since we were little. Anybody who's been a part of a youth group or a team is very aware of that balance of leadership. And that we need leaders, but that we also need followers. You can't have an entire group of leaders. You also need people who are going to do the work or follow suggestions or that kind of thing. And we'll go over, different theories of leadership, different types of leadership in a few weeks. But first establishing that that's a dialectic, that there's a balance in each group about who's leading and how they are leading and who is following and how they are following. Next, we have spontaneity versus structure. Titus loves to cuddle, loves to lay on you, but only on his own terms. He is a cat, after all. And so you can't pick him up and make him snuggle you like he is in this picture. He just has to choose to do that when he feels like it, spontaneously feels like it. On the right, we've got Apollo, sorting his file folders, being very structured. And this one, I think, of all of the dialectics, has the ability to be the most binary. So we really put ourselves into one of these categories, and you know which one you're in, right? Do you like things planned out? Do you like things talked about, prepared, prepped, organized, and planned, and everybody knows what they're doing? Or are you much more willing to have sort of a general outline and go with the flow, right? Much more spontaneous. And and can you feel how you're like, ugh, on the other one? But remember, we all have both of these in us, right? There are definitely things we're willing to be more spontaneous on, and all of us have times or situations in which we're more structured. No matter which side you tend towards. And every group has both of these. And I will say that whatever you're doing in the group often helps determine which one of these you lean towards. It really does depend on the members, obviously, but sometimes the actual goal of the group or what the group is tending to do can help determine whether you lean more towards structure or whether you lean more towards that spontaneity. Next, we have engaged versus disengaged. And this one, I think, is the only one that it's really tempting to label disengaged as negative, because the way that we first think of disengage is this, like the book says, low energy, inaction, and that's not going to get you anything done. But there is this idea of having times for rest or renewal or relaxation. I also think it's helpful to think of this in pieces, right? So there might be times where you're really engaged in something in the group. There might be times where other people are engaged in it and you don't have to be, which would make you disengaged, which isn't bad. It's just that that's not a thing you're engaged in. I think one example is if you're doing a group presentation and you have to put together a Prezi, which is an online visual aid tool, and you've got a couple people that really know how to operate Prezis and put those together. They might be really engaged in doing that, and you might not be really engaged in doing that. You might be engaged in doing something else in the group, which would be disengaged in putting together the Prezi. Not bad, just not engaged in that specific part. So I think that's how that dialectic really plays in. And then finally, we have the concept of open system versus closed system. And in the pictures here, Titus is sprawling across both Matthew and I, very open, and Apollo is sitting in his carrier, very closed. This refers to how much you're going outside of your group. So open system use a lot of outside resources, a lot of outside help, contact other people, that kind of thing. Closed systems really operate within themselves, so within their own resources, within their own skills and strengths. And again, this is a balance, and this one too really does deal with what you're doing. You may not need a lot of extra resources. You may, in your group projects, you may be really comfortable and viable in a closed system. You may really need the library, right? You may really need to interview other people. Like there might be a lot of other things you might need, which would put you much more into an open system. And again, this is a balance. So these are the group these are the dialectics, group dialectics, and I really hope that by using my cats, Titus and Apollo, this is a drawing that a former student of mine did on a whiteboard one time, which I just love, that you can help remember these and really learn these and then eventually be able to apply them. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I know Dusty and Carissa did because cats are their favorite animals. But I hope this will help you break down some of the readings and go a little bit deeper. So as always, email me or post if you have questions, and I will talk to you soon. Have a beautiful day.